It's working on my computer for me right now, so they're gonna hit me up at some point to get some code. But hello, everybody. Whoa!
Whoa.
Already, shit's going wrong at Casa de Bijou. Mayday! Mayday! Botherina! Send help! Send help! Somebody send help! Toby is bad luck.
I'm sorry. I had no part in that.
Well,
The recorder just fell onto the floor. If you're wondering what that dramatic
distracted
moment
me. I blame you. I was talking to you. I leaned back. I forgot. I got out of my box.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I don't get out of my box. This is what keeps me. Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to Unbothered by Ty Rivera. As always, coming to you from high atop Ty Rivera Studios, a.k.a. Casa de Bijou. I just dropped my recorder, and now we're fine again. And so you know, my guest today is Toby Muresianu, who just distracted me.
It's part of my evil plan. It's going perfectly.
Apparently, yeah, and it is working perfectly. It's on point. So, this was a weird start. It doesn't usually drop right at the beginning. It does.
You don't choreograph.
It does drop at some point in almost every episode, to be honest. There's always a point where it ends up like falling over. Just usually I end up acting like it didn't happen.
It's because you have those headphones plugged in. You've got like a 3-foot headphone cord.
Yeah,
so
well, it's because it's such a long story with me and this situation and the podcast and the way things work out, Toby. I would love to tell it to you, but it would take up our entire hour.
You don't want a full episode about your headphone cord?
No, not today. And technical difficulties and me trying to do things with one hand and, that kind of stuff. I could really go into it. But that's not why I have you here. I want okay. Toby is a comic here in LA.
Yes.
I've known you since were you living in the Bay or did you just hang out in the Bay?
I used to live in the Bay. I lived there for about a year and a half, but I actually met you for the first time when I was briefly in LA almost 10 years ago now, because I moved out here for a couple months right after college, but then I ended up going to the Northwest, Seattle, and then San Francisco.
Okay, so then I remember you from San Francisco, so I guess
we must have met up there then.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought I remembered you from San Francisco. Is that not correct?
That could very well be correct.
You were doing the spots in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I met a lot of people when I was in San Francisco, to the point where a lot of comics think I'm from the Bay, but I've never actually lived there. I just had a good friend, Chris Doran, there.
Oh, yeah, I know Chris.
Yeah, and we were always hitting as many mics as possible, and so I got around the Bay a lot. And then you have one of my favorite shows / podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that is, last week when I drove in actually from Oregon, I immediately went to watch Unsafe Space.
Yeah.
And it was, you guys were talking about Russia. And I know nothing about what's going on over there. So I was like, let me go learn in a fun way. Because that's what I like about your podcast. If you want, talk a little bit about how it works and what your podcast is.
Sure. Basically, we pick a controversial topic for each episode or something that's in the news and really been a focus. And then people do stand-up on it. And then we have a response from like experts who work in the field or study it, and then a discussion with them, the comics, and the audience. And we pass like a mic around the audience so people can chime in.
Yeah, and I really like the comic part. Like the experts are fun, are cool, but usually more just informational.
Sure, yeah.
And then the comics are silly, like Kira Sultanovich was last week, and Sophia Alexandra.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were both really fun, especially when they got to that part where they were kind of outdoing each other with whose family had it worse.
Yeah, that was great.
And Kira just finally was like, "You want to go? Or are we gonna do it?" It was the best for me.
My family got shot to death.
Yeah.
Just like, oh.
Yeah, that's when Sophia had just kind of shut it down by, mentioning that, her family got shot.
But it's great. That's part of the reason I love it, because you hear a different side of a lot of these comics, and you might not know this about them, but, a lot of people have connections to these issues that are in the news. Like, Sophia and Kira, both, I believe, born in Russia. And came over here and have all sorts of stories. And they're both funny comics, but you wouldn't you wouldn't have heard all the history unless they had the opportunity to explore it more fully.
Yeah, because I've known Kira for several years now,
Mm-hmm.
and I never even knew that she was from Russia. You know, I mean, I didn't know that she had come here. I had just assumed, that she was born in the United States, and because if you talk to her, she doesn't have an accent. It's not like what you typically think about when you think about somebody that was born in Russia. I mean, like. Which I don't know if just some people put more effort into it or what happens. Because I know people that have been here longer than Kira.
Well, I think Kira, I think she came over, if she wasn't in fact born here. I know her parents are from Russia, but I think she came over when she was quite young. So at the very least. So I think that's part of it. But it is also interesting how much variation there is there. Even like, and sometimes people grow up here and they still have accents. Samir Suri, you know him?
Yeah.
He talks about that, how he grew up in a kind of an insular immigrant community here, and there were people who grew up in California, and they're in first grade and they're speaking with accents.
Yeah, I had Samiri on Unbothered. If you guys don't remember, fellow fag Samir Suri. He was a lot of fun, but he. I think he's sometimes a little too smart for people.
He is really smart. He reads like 9 newspapers a day or something insane. He's one of those people.
Yeah, he's really smart, and he when he decides to talk about anything, he usually really knows his shit. And I think that intimidates a lot of people when they're talking to him.
Yeah.
I saw it happen at a podcast where they were talking to him about politics, and he just went, kind of went off on it, and they weren't ready for it. It was just kind of like, oh, well, we hadn't expected anybody to actually know what they were talking about,
Totally. And he's got like this like flamboyant, fun-loving vibe that you don't expect him to like really know his shit the way he totally does.
Yeah, and he throws in his quippy little jabs here and there, while he's doing it, and it's really fun to watch. That's why he's another person that I'll actually make my way out to see every once in a while when he's going to be doing something like that. I've seen his stand-up a bit, and I'm a fan of his stand-up, but more than anything, I like watching him do, like, panel. And so this is something a lot of people wanted me to talk about, which I don't know why, but Bill O'Reilly.
Huh. Okay, yeah.
What are your thoughts? And then I'll tell you mine.
Well, I mean, it seems like he's had sexual harassment allegations against him forever, and they're finally catching up with him. I don't know what happens new this time, but I mean, I believe them. These aren't even coming from like, super liberal sources or anything. These are like Fox News anchors who are saying it. So
we're in the exact same spot, like as far as that goes. Like, I don't believe anybody's lying, but I also don't know why it's all of a sudden become a big deal. I think it should have been a big deal the first time it happened.
Yeah.
Because obviously they've been paying out. And I'm not even a person who follows Bill O'Reilly, but I've known about his allegations forever. I mean, like, for the better part of 10 years now, we've been hearing about it occasionally. And I'm just like, why is it all of a sudden now you decide to make it a real issue?
It's the same thing like with Bill Cosby, right? I mean, Hannibal Buress, what set it off was him being like, just Google it. It's already there. But for some reason, people just look the other way forever, and then suddenly
I wonder what it is. I mean, like, I guess maybe just the way that social media works these days.
It might have been like also Roger Ailes. I don't know I guess he's not there anymore, and he was kind of the CEO and was sort of notorious for that as well. So maybe he was kind of protecting him, and now he's not there anymore.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. I forgot about the Roger Ailes thing. Like, but the same thing though, it was like, I guess, maybe people just aren't in the mood to put up with that shit anymore the way they used to. Because it did used to be pretty common. Like, I tell people all the time, all you have to do is look at movies from the 80s. Like, I remember there's that scene in Mr. Mom. Have you ever seen the movie Mr. Mom?
When I was like my kid.
Yeah, well, there's this scene where Terry Garr, who plays the wife, and the breadwinner in that situation, she goes on a business trip, and her boss is like wearing a robe and chasing her around, and like that wasn't considered, like, it was considered like a sleazy thing to do, but it wasn't particularly wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't. it was a boys will be boys thing. I
Yeah,
think,
and she
you know?
wasn't going to have any kind of real recourse, or nobody wondered that on the, after watching the movie, like, I wonder what she's going to do about that. It was like,
Is she gonna file a complaint? in
yeah,
the
it's
next
just
one?
like, yeah, she's going to show up to work on Monday if she's smart, like,
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, but it is like, I mean, it's not in all cases. I mean, obviously, Trump has certain allegations against him, and Clinton did, and I mean, they're still alive and kicking. you know.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that did bother me when people kept talking about Trump and the grab her by the pussy situation, and even the way I saw it handled on The View at one point with Joy Behar. She referred to the Clinton accusers as, I don't remember the exact term she used. I think it was like these tramps that have, because they were talking about Hillary, and then she was like, well, what's Hillary supposed to say, when somebody brings out these tramps that have slept with their husband? And it's like, that's not what the accusation is.
Yeah.
Nobody's just claiming that they slept with him, or
Yeah.
it's
And it's
harassment.
also really weird to refer to them as tramps when he slept with them. It's not like he was a passive party in this.
Yeah, and that's what, but nobody picked up on it. I mean, like, I saw a few like more conservative type Twitter personalities like tweet out a clip of it and ask, where are the social justice warriors now? But the fact that nobody picks up on that and is like, well, it's either wrong for both sides or it's right for both sides. It can't be so selective. Like, it's cool if Bill Clinton does it, but and really, I'm on the side of, I don't think anybody should be doing it.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to actual rape and sexual assault. Then that also gets kind of murky, and you get accused of victim blaming if you ask any questions, which to me really sucks, because it's like, well, how are we supposed to figure out it? And it's not like nobody's ever accused anybody falsely of rape or sexual assault. So it's kind of a weird spot to be in.
Yeah, I mean, you do have, an innocent until proven guilty standard in the court system. I mean, I think you also have to, just as a person, you don't need to have that to form an opinion about what probably happened. But I mean, when you get this idea that you should always 100% believe what the woman says, you get situations like the Rolling Stone article, where they did this whole investigation and, trashed this fraternity or whatever, and it turns out that there was no basis for it, or the Duke lacrosse thing a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have to be able to have some amount of skepticism, but it should also be balanced out, by having compassion and realizing that, most people who accuse probably are, responding to something real that happened, especially if you have multiple people or something like that, it becomes less and less plausible to think, oh, it's all a fabrication.
Yeah, like the Bill Cosby situation, even if you don't believe every single one of the accusers, you have to believe some of them. It's like, why would all these women, especially with that many, it's like, why would all these women make up this same story? Or, and they all kind of have the same theme to them with the being drugged or waking up groggy or that kind of, so it's, I don't know. It's weird for me because in a lot of cases, I'm on the side of social justice warriors with certain things. I just don't always like the way they come at things, and it makes it so I can't really support it. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I kind of believe what you're saying, or I agree with what you're saying, but I just don't like the way you say it, so I'm not going to have your back, or I'm definitely not going to bat for you and acting like, I support the way you say things.
Yeah. It is frustrating. I mean, I think you mentioned it in an earlier podcast. I was listening to the one from last week and stuff like that. Thank you for the shout out.
Oh, yeah.
I was doing my taxes. This is not good. Yeah, it's very all or nothing, and if you're not 1,000% with them, to a knee jerk extent, then you're against them. You're evil. You're hiding something, and that's really turns people off. And it's just not intelligent. I mean, it's like, let's be real people. Let's not feel like we have to be in lockstep. And it particularly alienates me, I guess, because, maybe I think I started out like more liberal, and I remembered like when George Bush was like, you're with us or you're against us. And everyone on the left was like, no, fuck that. You can dissent. There's such a thing as nuance. And, we're going to use our whole heads here, and to see it flip out flip in the other direction, I think, alienates a lot of people like me who are more moderate, But at the same time, I don't want to be like there's the anti-SJW thing where it's like, no, all these women are always lying all the time about rape. And it's like, no, sexism exists, racism exists. You have to acknowledge these problems. But at the same time, you can't wig out and go nuclear all the time and,
Yeah, I'm willing to be a lot more case by case with everything, and that bothers people. And I don't think that there should ever be anything wrong with asking a question. As long as you're not, you lying bitch, why would you say this? Like, that's not the way you ask a question. But, just to be like, hey, well, what about this? Or there seems to be an inconsistency here. Can anybody explain this for me? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Black Lives Matter was one where it did get on my nerves with the way that people treated it, because it's like, well, I, agree with what you're upset about, but I don't agree with you shutting down a freeway. And then people wanted to call me racist about that. And it was like, why am I racist for not thinking it's okay for you to shut down a freeway? Like, that's nothing against this color of your skin or the color of the people that are even protesting, especially when with Black Lives Matter, that was kind of a mixed movement as far as race went. There were a lot of white people that were, on the side of Black Lives Matter. So for me, it was like, if anything, I think liberal white people get in there and fuck things up more than anybody else,
Yeah, I mean, one thing with that, I remember I did like a ride share with this guy who was a photographer who had been at one of those Black Lives Matters march where they ended up shutting down the freeway. But he said, like, most people were not down to shut up the freeway. But then this fringe group just showed up, like, after this whole protest. And then they're like, we're going to shut down the freeway. And, like, most of the protesters weren't even on board with that. But, like, if I post something online, like, they shouldn't have shut down the freeway, but I support their cause, then, like, I'm the bad guy because I oppose this fringe element, even of this protest,
Yeah. As like Berkeley is another example of that. Like, I just don't understand everything being such a tantrum in Berkeley. Like, I get it, protest, do what you want to do, but you don't have to set shit on fire. You don't have to break stuff. You don't have to physically assault people. Like, that's where it's like one of those situations where it's a good example of where I get, like. But then really in Berkeley, a lot of times I don't get it, because a lot of times in Berkeley, what they seem to be fighting are words and ideas.
Yeah. Well, I think there's like generally people equate now, oh, your words are violence, and they make that, okay, so that if they're being violent to me, then I can justify being physically violent. But I mean, the truth is that words aren't violence, generally speaking. I mean, like, at least the words they're talking about generally are a lot milder than they make them out to be.
Yeah.
So.
Especially when some of us embrace those words. Like the word faggot is supposed to be so terrible, but I identify as a faggot. Like, I prefer fag or faggot as opposed to like gay man, or, because I think that fag better describes what I am. And then I have it saved somewhere, but there was a tweet, or maybe it was a Facebook post from Calpurnia Adams. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I'm not, no.
She's a trans woman, has been pretty much an activist and one of the forerunners in really fighting for trans rights. And she had posted on Facebook one day that every once in a while she likes to reconnect with the word tranny. And she kind of explained why. And it's kind of like, if you have people that identify as these protected classes, so to speak, but at the same time aren't particularly offended by these words, it's like, why should we all take on your emotions because you really are offended by these words? How about you feel the way you feel about these words, and I feel the way I feel about these words, and we can both just be who we are. We don't have to all take the same, now I'm supposed to be offended just because you're offended.
Yeah, we don't have to take it all upon ourselves to set the rules for everyone else,
Yeah.
You can just feel your own thing and say your own piece.
Yeah, and like, I get it when people are being disrespectful, but in a lot of cases, sometimes people just need to be told politely how things work, what they're allowed to say or what they're not allowed to say. Like, I tell people all the time, I use the word tranny when I want to, but I know how to use it, and so I tell, like, when I'm talking to straight audiences, I'll even say in so many words, do not say this word because you will lose your job. So don't do what I do at all. My job is different. What I do is different. The way I do things is different. So I just don't, I don't understand being like, these are now the rules and we're all going to abide by them.
Yeah. And it's never like we're going to get consensus from everyone and then we'll set the rules. It's like I have a blog, so I get to set them. And if 50 of my friends like this post and share it, then that means it's ratified,
Well, yeah, and it really is. Yeah, that's all it takes now is just, I've got so many likes. So clearly the world agrees with me. And it's like, it's 50 people out of how many? I was having a conversation earlier, and sometimes you're just kind of damned if you do or damned if you don't. There was a situation with Lena Dunham, when she got upset with that football player because at the Met Gala he didn't look at her in any particular way. He didn't acknowledge her, and so then she was like, so I guess I'm just completely nothing to you. You don't see me even as a woman or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if he had talked to you, that would have been catcalling or harassing you in some way. But then he doesn't talk to you, and now he's, completely ignoring the fact that you're even a woman or you exist. And, I think for me, that's what really made it. Like, I can understand you if you were to say, like, this person kind of served me shade or didn't acknowledge me at all, and it seemed kind of rude or whatever, like that kind of thing. But when you bring in the fact that, I guess it's because you don't see me in a sexual way, like that's what your point is. It's like, well, I thought you've been saying you don't want people to objectify you.
Yeah. I guess that's the secret is there's always a rule that you're going to break or you're going to, you can find yourself in violation of, and also, I mean, I think that's just an odd way to sort of project your own insecurities on someone just not looking at you once and be like, to like generalize about, group of people or something like that based on one momentary experience when you don't know what's going on in his head. Maybe he's distracted. Maybe he doesn't recognize you. Maybe, he's not interested in you. Like it's to be like, I saw you in this 5 seconds, and in my head, I created an entire picture, not just for what you were thinking, but for why you were thinking it and how everyone in your situation would do that to me because of who I am.
Yeah, and he's a football player.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance he doesn't watch girls.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's just, I know that there's plenty, like, I was at what was it? The All Deaf Digital Movie Awards. And I know that there were a lot of people there that are technically quote unquote celebrities that I just didn't even know were celebrities, and I'm sure they do different things, like whether it's, underground rappers or, but like models, but I'm just not familiar with everybody. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that I didn't treat as any kind of celebrity, but it wasn't because I was trying to be shady with them. I just didn't know who they were, so
yeah.
I think that happens quite a bit, especially in LA when you're so focused on what it is you do. Because in stand-up, well, even in stand-up, a lot of times I don't know some of the other stand-ups that are pretty well known.
Hey, I mean, I don't even recognize people I've met before.
I do that all the time, yeah.
So, like, why would I recognize someone from some show that I might not have even seen,
Yeah, the time I got laughed at for it, and I didn't appreciate it, was with Jimmy Dore. Because I didn't know Jimmy Dore.
Yeah.
And I met him at the Slow Comedy Festival, and he came up to me after the show and was like, I think you're really funny. And he was like, talking to me and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, thanks. And so, I was trying to be cool and just start conversation back. I didn't even know he was a comic, and I was just like, so how did you find out about the show? And then he was on, like, I was on like 2 after you.
Yeah.
And then one of the other comics started laughing, which made it worse. And then I think Jimmy Dore at that point thought I was maybe being shitty with him or something. So it was uncomfortable for like we ended up making it cool later, but it was uncomfortable for a while.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, and I didn't mean anything at all. I wasn't, like literally what I told you was what it was. Like I wasn't familiar, and I don't know, I don't know every comic and what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like every comics has to understand that situation because you meet so many people. You're on so many shows with so many comics. You're on one show with someone once, you're not necessarily going to remember them 6 months later,
Yeah, and I don't get upset when people don't know me or don't recognize me. I'm not at all worried about that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, there's a million comics.
I almost feel a little bit better when someone does recognize me because I feel less bad about how many people I forget. So I'm like, okay, phew. It's just not just me being terrible.
I feel good about it, but for a different reason. I just feel like, all right, clean slate. I don't have to deal with what this person thinks of my opinions on Facebook or, the fact that I got into it with one of their friends at some point on social media or, I don't have to deal with any of that. So a lot of times I'm very happy when people don't know who I am. Like, yeah, this is good. It's a good place
Nothing
to start.
apologize for.
Yeah. And that's one thing that does bother me is I don't mind people not agreeing with things I say, but it seems like everybody does want an apology now. And I've been very clear, you're not going to find it here. I don't care what I do. I'm just not apologizing. Like I'll clear things up with people, but I'm not apologizing because you didn't like what I said. It's like, why would I apologize?
Yeah. Teach their own. I mean, I'll apologize if I feel like I've done something that I do regret, but at the same time, I feel like the people who want apologies often are people who are shittier to me than I am to them. So I'm like, well, we can both apologize or I'm not going to because, even if I regret it, I don't feel like I should have a unilateral obligation to.
Yeah, well, that's like if I've done something wrong or every once in a while I'll feel bad about the way that I approached a situation and then I'll apologize. But I'm not going to apologize to you just because I said something that you don't like.
Yeah,
that's where I'm not apologizing, Like I know that at one point I thought somebody was giving me a vibe that they weren't giving me. I ended up finding out from a mutual friend later that they weren't giving me that vibe. And I was on stage and I was having one of those days where I was just kind of tired of people somewhat attacking me. And so I just went after this particular person while I was on stage, and I didn't completely go after them as a person, but I was just, kind of shitty.
Yeah.
And so later on, I was like, yeah, well, when I talk to them, I'll let them know that,
So they weren't in the room? Or?
Oh, yeah, they were in the room.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, but then later on, they were talking to a mutual friend, and they were like, I know Ty thought that I was like judging him at that point, but I really wasn't. The only thing I don't like about Ty is that he makes me laugh at things that I shouldn't be laughing at.
Oh, that's a compliment.
Yeah, and so, but I thought they were giving a different vibe than they were giving, so and once in a while I do that, but that just comes from having to deal with so many people's fucking shit.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't always be responsible for the way you feel.
I don't feel like you ever take responsibility for the way people feel.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying they always want me to, Toby.
Fair enough.
There's always a little bit of like, you're supposed to feel this way because I felt this way about what you said. Well, with me in a lot of cases. I don't know. Have you dealt with any of the, like, because, there was one that you really turned into a little bit of a shitstorm for you. And that was when you said that the women that are going after certain comedy clubs or venues should go after like UCB and some of the ones that they...
Oh, for like Louis C.K. and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah, that was a little bit... I feel like every like 6 months or couple months I'll have a shitstorm because there's some cause of the day within the comedy community or within the, just the general left-wing community, which is like 99% of my Facebook feed. And it becomes very one-sided, and I'll just sort of try to throw a wrench into things if I believe it's just warranted. But I think in that case it was, there was like this whole thing where there's a guy accused of rape in the comedy community, and it was an anonymous accusation. Like, no one knew who was saying it or what the accusation was, and he was banned from one venue, and then a couple other venues banned him because they're like, oh, if you're banned by one person, you're banned from us too. But he never knew what people were saying about him. He never knew like that and stuff. And turns out later on he is a total shitbag and apparently, very likely did do this.
Yeah.
But it was, the idea of it was just that the rhetoric, if you have an accusation against you, you gotta believe it and you gotta act on it. And it was just like, well, what about Louis C.K., who was, had accusations about him from multiple women, and, people were very upset with him, but somehow he still gets a pass to go on all these clubs that are banning this other guy. And it's like, what, if you're funny enough, you get a pass for sexual assault? Like, if you're respected enough in the community, you get a pass? And so it was just kind of like, it was just kind of putting that out there as a double standard that I felt like was being advanced.
Yeah, I had a similar take on something to do, maybe even the same guy or whatever. But my thing was, if you're not going to tell me what it is they supposedly did, why am I supposed to be a part of helping ruin this person's career?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I don't get in a lot of those situations. And then it's, some person will chime in and be like, well, I saw it. Well, who the fuck are you? Why am I supposed to take your word? I don't even know who you are, really. And now I'm supposed to believe secondhand information that you supposedly saw, and I don't even know if you actually saw it or you're just saying that because you want to have the person's back. And I still don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I might not even consider that to be a big deal. There have been times where I was supposed to be outraged as a gay man, and I was like, I'm not really outraged. So, and I'm not saying that these accusations were the same, but to me, it's like, yeah, I kind of have to know. I mean, like, I don't have to know anything if you're just going to handle it on your own, and that's between you and the courts and whatever else. But if you're saying, as a community, we should all make sure that this person doesn't work anymore, then I think I should at least be able to ask what it is they did.
Yeah, it feels sometimes like it's like, here's your pitchfork, let's go. And you're like, wait, where are we going? What
Yeah. What am I supposed to do with this? Am I just supposed to start poking people? Or like, and I don't know what they did still, so I don't know why I'm poking them. I guess I just poke them for the fuck of it so that I can be like everybody else.
Yeah.
I didn't, the best-selling situation seemed to spiral out of control in a lot of ways too. And, I stayed out of it because for me, I was like, I don't know what happened. And I don't, I read what she put on Facebook, but even when she gave like her reason on Facebook for why she did it, I really didn't agree with that. She was like, I just didn't want to have to deal with being cross-examined or having anybody ask me any questions. And it's like, well, then that's not really fair.
Well, I mean, I think with the Beth Stelling thing, I guess maybe I had a different reaction because, she posted pictures of her bruises and stuff like that. And I know her personally, we've done shows together. And so for me, it wasn't a situation where it's like an anonymous accuser, with the existence of an allegation. For her, it seemed like there was more evidence being put forth. And I felt like, I mean, at some level, you're doing a gut reaction, I'm not a jury or anything, but at the same time, I recognize that, sometimes the justice system we don't have a great justice system, It's really hard to press a case against someone. It takes years. I can understand why it's traumatic. I can understand why you might not have, forensic evidence a month later or have conflicted feelings within yourself. So I looked at the evidence that she put forward and I was like, yeah, I believe you. I'm convinced. And I think that this is a situation where, I feel justified in not that I like really participated in, I don't, I never knew who the person she, who she had dated was, but I mean, I know their name now, but like, I didn't know them personally. I never heard of them, but like, I didn't feel like there was a travesty of justice there.
Yeah, I think for me, part of the thing is I've known a lot of people, male and female, that have been in toxic relationships. So sometimes I run into that when people talk about, abuse. I'm like, was it straight up abuse like that, or is that a toxic relationship that you're both willing participants in? Sometimes, I have to wonder that. It's like, were you both fighting each other? Because I know plenty of girls that have fought guys, my sister being one of them. Like her and her, she's dead now, but and it wasn't
Not
from domestic.
It
wasn't.
This might have just taken a very dark turn.
Yeah, it wasn't from domestic violence, but she died several years ago. But she was in a mutually abusive relationship. They were just in a toxic relationship. And at first, we really, as a family, were trying to get her out of it. But then after a while, it was like, well, we can't just keep making him the bad guy when she'll say things in her own words where she's like, he was driving down the street. We were driving down the street together. He was the one driving. And he said something that pissed me off, and I punched him in the side of his head. And then he pulled over, and we got in a fight. And him being a bigger man, he obviously was going to get the better of that situation. But it's like, really, what are you supposed to do if you're driving down the street and somebody punches you in the side of the head,
Yeah. I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's kind of I guess I'm of the school where I don't think it's okay to hit a woman under any circumstances. I know some people say like, oh, it's equality or whatever. I think like if you're in that situation, if you're in a toxic relationship, you're hurting someone, it's not right. You should get out of that. I think that's getting out of the relationship is the proper response. I think, physically injuring them is not. But I mean, I've never been in that situation, but still, I guess I sort of kind of believe that at the core.
Yeah, I believe it too. And in a perfect world, that's what would happen. But there are people that have been raised in different situations. Like some people, once you hit them, don't even see a male-female thing. Like some people just see it as they've been at that point attacked by somebody. So that's where I have gotten in trouble for saying that I think that male or female, you should just keep your hands to yourself.
I agree.
And then I've had people jump on me for that, and they're like, well, a man should still never hit a woman. And it's like, well, once you put your hands on somebody else, you can't look to me for any kind of,
sympathy or
I'm just not having your back at that point. It's like, you should not have put your hands on that person because you don't know what they've been through when they were younger. Like, we'd like to say that that's the situation, but what if a man was raised being beat by a woman? Like his mother was abusive, and that's just a trigger for him. So when somebody hits him, he doesn't care who it is. He just goes on the attack, So you don't know what it is the other person's dealing with. As far as I go, the way I see it,
Yeah.
And so it's just the best way is just not to put your hands on anybody that you don't want to hit you. That's,
But I mean, and I mean, I guess it's unfortunate that.
And all this has nothing to do with Beth anymore, by the way. I'm not.
Like, no one's ever said that I think that Beth was physical or anything.
Yeah, no, I'm not. None of this is in any way to do with Beth. It's just where the conversation is led, but or what my, why I ask the questions that I ask sometimes, or sometimes I choose to stay out of things. And that's, again, where I don't think it's fair for people to expect you to jump in, because it's like, well, if my thinking is completely different from yours, so I just choose to keep my mouth shut and not really get involved with it. But then you pressure me to, like, have an opinion, so then I give you my opinion, and then you're mad at me for that. It's like, well, you should have never bothered me that much with this, You should have just left it at, okay, I don't say anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think... And I think people should be feel free to express an opinion. And if I disagree with you, I feel free to tell you that. But, like, I'm not going to be angry that you have it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well...
Like, I mean, yeah.
it just makes it so we can't really know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that, it's good, even if you don't agree with someone, even if you decide like their thinking is so different from yours that you really would rather not spend time with them.
Yeah.
At least you know what it is they think, or what kind of person you're cutting off. It's like, okay, well, I got a pretty good idea of what you are, and it's just not what I'm in line with, so there's really no reason for us to hang out.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly. It's not to say that any opinion is like if someone has said, "Oh yeah, it's fine to beat the shit out of your kids." I wouldn't be like, "Well, that's your opinion. Everyone's entitled to theirs." I'd be like, "That guy's a fucking asshole. I'm not hanging out with him." Maybe I give him a piece of my mind, but I mean, I guess at some level, I feel like I'd rather know that, and I'd rather have people say that than just be like, knowing you 10 years and then you lose your kids and I'm like, holy shit, it was a child abuser this whole time.
Yeah. The only time we ever got into it on Facebook, the two of us, it was about that guy that
I think it was about I'm remembering it now. I think it was about the whatchamacallit, Khan.
Yes, that's who it was. I was trying to remember
the parent
his
of
name.
the soldier who died and spoke at the Democratic National Convention. Yeah.
And it was because, like, I was technically getting into it with one of your friends. And because to me, what I was trying to say was, I just don't particularly look at that man as an expert in anything. So I don't know why I was supposed to treat his opinion with any more weight than anybody else's.
His opinion on which specific topic?
Well, remember, he had said something at the convention, and everybody was acting like that was the final word, and we were just supposed to listen to him, or a lot of people were. And I was just like, I didn't think that Donald Trump or anybody else owed him any particular amount of respect.
I mean, I think, I guess I think he's owed some respect. I mean, I guess it depends if you're considering respect for his opinion as a quote unquote expert, or respect for his experience, raising a child who went on to give his life for the country, as a Muslim. I mean, I think that, you very often hear from the families of people who have been affected by tragedy at, whether it's, Trump at his convention, at his speeches, he'll often have like the mothers of people who have been killed by illegal immigrants and stuff like that, And, is he a policy expert? Maybe not, but like, is it worth listening to him and acknowledging that there are people who are in the same boat as him, where they've, loved this country and been observant Muslims, and then, their child gives their life for this country, and then they still feel like this leading presidential candidate is maligning them on the basis of their religion. And I think that's a valid perspective to hear, and I respect him more than I would like, someone who's just some random comic, like suburban comic, who has their opinion based on an article they read. I respect someone for having that really gritty firsthand experience.
Yeah, I listen. I don't mind, but I don't think I'm supposed to treat it with any particular amount of weight. Just like I don't when it comes to, like you mentioned, the people that talk about the immigrants. I'll listen to your story, but that doesn't mean that I owe you a particular amount of respect, or really anybody does. It's like people die every day. People die from different things every day. So yeah, I can listen to your experience and be like, yeah, okay, I get it, and I hear you, and I understand that that's, a particular thing that happened in your life, and it definitely gives me a different kind of perspective on it. But when all of a sudden I'm supposed to now, not vote for the person that I'm voting for because you said that you feel a particular way as a Muslim, and really, when did I become so concerned with Muslims anyway? I don't think that they're particularly concerned with my plight as a gay man. So for me, it's just like, no, I don't.
Well, I mean, some might be. I mean, you can't really, I mean, obviously there's going to be a variety of opinions within the community, and um, I mean, Muslims have become, I guess, in the campaign, it was something of a political issue because part of Trump's platform was banning Muslims from immigrating to the country. So, I mean, I think it's a relevant topic. But, I mean, I can sympathize with sometimes, on social media, people think, oh, look what he said, mic drop, one Gold Star father tells it like it is, Trump is destroyed. You know what I mean? And then it's like, no, I still have other opinions. I still have, other factors that are going to go into my vote. But I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I did find his testimonial compelling.
That's what my problem was everybody treated it like it was some mic drop moment, and now we're all just supposed to change the way we think because this one. And so that's what I got into it with your friend about. And then, like, she tried to say that I was being disrespectful to Gold Star families, and I was like, no, that's not the way it works. I mean, like, I am the type of person that if I wanted to say, because somebody at some point, I don't know if it was you or her, that was basically said that I was basically saying fuck Gold Star families, and I was like, oh, I don't think you know how I work. If I wanted to say fuck Gold Star families, I'd say that. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just like anybody disagreeing with me isn't a shot at the gay community. You're arguing with me as a person. You have a difference of opinion with me. It's not a shot at the gay community. It's not a shot at the Latino community. It's me and you having a conversation right now, and I don't necessarily agree with what you said. And it doesn't have to come down to like all of a sudden we're in it over something bigger than what it is. I mean, like, do I have questions? Like, I've been to Bahrain and I was told that I really shouldn't be out alone. That's what I was told, I mean, like, I am obviously gay, and that's not really in line with their thinking and their religion. And they do have, the military guys told us, because we were there to perform for the military, and the military guys had told us that even when it comes to them as military, if something were to go wrong because of the way that the agreements are set up with them even having a base in Bahrain, and if something were to go wrong and they were to do something like even kill one of the military guys in the street, there's really not a lot they can do about it because of the way the agreements work out. And basically they're doing us a favor by even letting us have a base on their land. So, it's kind of, and I think that's where a lot of people don't understand that, like, sometimes as gay people, maybe we wouldn't be the most sympathetic. Some of us wouldn't. I'm not speaking for all of the gay community. I'm just saying I know some of us aren't the most sympathetic because we do occasionally see some crazy stuff like, that footage they had of the gay man getting launched off the building. Like when you see shit like that and it's like, oh, that's what you want to bring over here? I don't know if I'm down.
Well, I would think you wouldn't be down.
It's
I like staying inside the building.
Yeah, so it's just, it's...
Well, I mean, I think that, so, I mean, for one thing, I'll say this. I think it's okay to criticize culture. And I think that that's kind of a double standard that people have on the left, where they think they can criticize the culture of businesses or white people or colleges or walk rooms, whatever. They'll criticize culture to the end of the day. But if you say, here's the thing about Muslim culture, whatever, they're like, whoa, you can't do that, I think it's okay to criticize culture, but I think it's also important to have a factual basis about it and to keep things in perspective. And so one thing I've had on Unsafe Space, we did a show on Islam, and one of the panelists was an ex-Muslim. She'd left the faith, and she had an interesting perspective, which was that, like, on the one hand, I don't want people to whitewash the fact that, like, when I left the faith, I got death threats, and that, like, there were people in my community who would, be kicked out of their family if they were gay, That's not exclusive, to Muslims. I mean, certainly there's, people of other faiths who kick out their kids for being gay or, send death threats over whatever block. But, like, for her, I think this was a cult in her eyes, and I think validly it was a cultural issue and a cultural problem. At the same time, she said, you know what? I mean, but I also don't want people just maligning me and thinking I'm a terrorist because I was born Muslim. And because, people don't know that I've left the faith even, but they see me and I'm Middle Eastern, and, they'll treat me like with suspicion, or I'll get screened or whatever, and she had a problem with that. And I think, so I wish we could just have a more educated conversation about like, these are the problems that exist in this culture. That being said, obviously we've got millions of Muslims here, and we don't have millions of terrorist attacks, because 99.9 whatever % of Muslims have no interest in committing a terrorist attack or blowing themselves up, and or committing whatever hate crime against their gay kids or whatever. Like, I mean, I'm sure it happens. I'm sure maybe it happens at a 0.01% of the population instead of 0.001% of the population, for some other faith. But I think it's necessary to be willing to criticize and call out, toxic behavior, no matter what the community is. At the same time, it's necessary to not blow it out of proportion and resort to stereotypes because of that. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense. I just also sometimes wonder why we have to bring them here to find this out. You know what I mean? Like, why in large numbers do we have to all just be open to having people come here, whether they're refugees? Sometimes it's like, maybe some of us do want to put a pause on it until maybe somebody explains it to us in a way without calling us stupid, or is willing to have some sort of conversation.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's like whatever's going on in your country is going on in your country. If I were like, you always hear people saying that, things go wrong in the United States, Trump gets elected, they're moving to Canada. Well, Canada might not want you.
I literally had a friend who was worked in Canadian immigration, and part of her job was telling Americans that they couldn't just move there.
Yeah.
Because they were mad at America.
Yeah.
You got to have skills.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with, like wanting people, because I've been very honest about it. I don't know a lot about, the Muslim faith at all. I mean, like, I've been to a mosque before, but that was in Bahrain, and just because we went kind of as one of the tourist things we decided to do, but I saw it, and it was, because we were in, went for the tour and everything like that, and it seemed cool and peaceful. So I've seen that side, but then I don't really know. And it was kind of weird when a friend of mine said that he was I don't remember the term he used, but he was not a religious person. Like, he didn't believe in God, but he did believe like in a higher power of some sort, and being good to people and that kind of stuff. And I don't remember exactly how he described it, but the woman that was our tour guide just kind of went blank and like couldn't wrap her head around it at all.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, weird to see too. Cause I mean, like, it was like a different kind of, like, here people get annoyed or whatever when you say that kind of stuff if they're religious, but for her, it seemed like it almost just didn't compute altogether that anybody could think that way, And so that was a little bit weird for me.
Oh, that's odd. I have been to a mosque in LA. And that's one thing I'd recommend, honestly. Like, if you're curious about it, like, the doors are open. At these places. I went to the Los Angeles Islamic Center. It's right downtown. Very friendly, and it's cool to see that. And, I go to churches too. Like, see what's in your community, and get that firsthand perspective. I think that's always a good thing.
I don't want to get stoned, Toby. I don't want to ask the wrong question and get fucking stoned, all right?
I'm sure you will not. Only digitally, online, on your Facebook page.
Yeah, that's the regular. Yeah, it's almost time for us to wrap up.
Yeah.
But before we did, I want to talk to you about when I did Unsafe Space and the lady stormed off. Did you ever talk to her again?
I did. Yeah. I just emailed her to say, sorry, sorry you were mad. Thanks anyway for coming and for your time. I didn't apologize, but I, just, wanted to smooth thing, do like a we cool, kind of a thing, I guess. I don't want people to blog about us or whatnot.
Did she respond?
Yeah, she was like, it's just a short, polite reply. All right, yeah, thanks anyway, or whatever, something like that. I don't remember the actual words.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was an interesting. I think that was the only time that's happened. that someone's left in the middle of a show.
That's the fun of having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was trying to be nice to her. I just eventually got tired of her
Yeah.
because I don't like when people um, want to tell me what's in my best interest.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, to me, that's really insulting. And, you know, if you want to talk about microaggressions and racism,
Yeah.
like, to me, you know, it's almost like almost the racial equivalent of here, little lady, let me grab that for you. It's like, oh, you don't think I can handle this idea myself, or deciding who I think I should be voting for? You know, like, you're going to tell me what's in my best interest, but you don't know anything about me other than the fact that I'm brown and I'm gay.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's the reduction of you to those characteristics.
Yes.
Which is so backwards in terms of progress, you know, to think
Yeah.
of you as just that.
And I wasn't assuming anything about her, even though I could take her factors and, you know, assume, like, you know, you're a blonde woman, you're a blonde white woman, you know, and there's the stereotypes that people have about that, you know, oh, so you're automatically a bimbo. Well, I don't think that at all. You know, I know plenty of women that are blonde that are smart, you know, so like, for me, it's like, if I'm not doing that to you, then I would really prefer you not do that with me either.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't know. I totally understand that. It was interesting listening back to that episode, you know, because you see it one way when it's on stage, you know, and then when you hear the recording, you know, just similarly with stand-up, right? You know, you often have a different perception. So it was interesting. And yeah, I mean, I still don't think she was, in my opinion, you know, justified in walking off. I see why she was angry. I think she was shitty to you, and that brought it upon itself. But also, you know, she was getting cut off, not just by you, but also by Helen and Lou, and, you know, comics, when it's a edgy topic. This was like a post-election show, like a day or two after the election, so feelings are very raw. And I get why she was frustrated, but I think she did something that you know, I do see on the left a bit now, and maybe it happens on the right and I'm just not as aware of it, but like, it felt like you have said this argument which hits the space on my bingo card, you know, and therefore I'm justified in walking out, and that's the right thing to do. Like, I am, like, she would say, like, she's like, it's not my job to explain something to you. And I'm like, you're a professor.
Yeah.
You know, if someone doesn't explain, understands, yeah, I mean, you should still have to defend your argument and explain why you believe that. But I think that there's, like, I'm sure she read a blog at some point that said, we're tired of having to explain our activism. And so that she's made that switch where it's like, if someone asks me to explain something, I don't have to do it, and I can be mad at them and I'm right and they're wrong, you know?
Yeah.
And if someone, you know, I'll get this where someone will make, there's some blatant stereotype about, like, guys or something like that. And I'm like, well, you know, what about these counterexamples? And it's like, oh, you're making a not all men argument or something like that and whatever. And it's like, first of all, I mean, that's a logical response to a blatant malignant stereotype, you know? If I said all women are bimbos and you're like, well, you know, my mom worked 3 jobs and whatever, I wouldn't be like, oh, you're making a not all women argument. You know, you're not dealing with the societal whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, like, people have those, like, knee-jerk responses to these, you know, to these places that are common that people go to, and they've convinced themselves that, you know, they're right by reacting a certain way that's been approved by their community. But it's not really thoughtful, and I don't think it's productive.
Yeah, well, when I thought about it, and I watched bits of it, because I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did watch bits of it when, you know, you posted it. I saw definitely where I could have handled things a little differently, you know, and maybe been a little more fun about certain things. I also, though, at that point was kind of tired of people attacking me, especially, you know, when she sat down and immediately said, fuck you. Like, that did hit me a certain way, and it was kind of like, and then when she was going to walk off, and this is something I need to work on, but I can tell when people are on the edge and getting ready to, and I just have that way of finding that thing to fucking, and I knew when she said I'm an expert and I said, no, you're not, it was going to fucking piss her off. I knew it was just going to fucking, you know what I mean? Like, I knew it. So, I mean, like, that's why I just went for it. I was like, yeah. Let me see if I can make this happen now, you know, like, and I didn't know she was going to walk off, but I knew I was going to get something very real out of her, whatever it was, you know. I was hoping for her to actually just curse me out and people get to see, like, you know, but instead she fucking took her ball and went home.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
But I also, you know, afterwards when I was watching it, I wished I could have just asked her, you know, when she said exactly what you brought up, I don't have to explain, or it's not my job to explain. Looking back at it, I wanted to ask her, like, well, then why'd you show up here?
Yeah.
Because that's all this show was supposed to be about, was us talking about our opinions. And
it's not much of a debate if you say, this is my belief and it's right, and someone says why, and you're like, I don't have to explain it to you.
Yeah, it's like, show's over. Well, me neither. And then everybody's just like, yeah, okay, then I'm not either. And all right, then we all just pack it up and go home, I guess. Show's over.
Yeah, it's true. It's not much of a discussion.
Yeah, but no, I'm glad you were able to do Unbothered finally.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Was there anything you wanted to talk about before we get out of here?
I guess one of the things in the back of my mind, because we touched upon it earlier, but I had a thought, which was when it comes to bringing Muslims abroad, you know, over here, and I guess, you know, and I'm not trying to convince you necessarily, but this is my take on it. I guess, you know, you have cases like, I guess one of the publicized ones is the Jews, you know, who during the Holocaust, there were ships of them that came over here, and people had very similar arguments. They said some of them could be German spies or whatever, so we shouldn't take the risk, we shouldn't leave them, and we shouldn't let them into the country, and they went back, and they were all killed. And I think that, you know, even if there's a non-zero risk, I think it does take a little bit of courage, you know, to say, hey, we're going to take a little bit, a small risk. Maybe we would let in a wrong person, but we're saving a lot of lives of people who are fleeing the people that we're fighting, you know? I mean, when ISIS, you know, conducts suicide bombings in markets, when Assad shovels barrels full of explosives into people's homes, like, that creates victims. That creates, you know, people that we should be protecting if we're going to espouse these values of freedom and democracy and to stand up for something better. And I do think also we do, it's not like we don't gain anything from having people like that in here. You know, Albert Einstein, you know, was a Jew who came over here during World War II and stayed here because the U.S., you know, gave him sanctuary and didn't make him go back. And, you know, so people do contribute. It's not just like we're taking this risk with nothing to gain. And so I don't know. That's my thinking as to why I wish that we were more welcoming and accepted higher numbers of refugees.
Yeah, and I can see how some people feel that way. Like, for me, it's even when you completely take fear out of it, there's a part of me that feels like maybe as a country we need to figure out what we're doing with the population we have now before we start adding, especially in large volume, more and more people. It's kind of like we're trying to figure stuff out here. And sometimes, like, I look at it like here in my apartment, right? If, say, you were having a hard time and, you know, you're in your place, you're wherever you are, let's say the Valley. I don't know where you live, but okay, so you're in the Valley and, you know, you're having a hard time or whatever. Well, say that I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm doing just as far as my finances and, you know, figure out a system at my place, just get a rhythm here. Well, you now are being kicked out of your place or having whatever problems at your place, and I'm sort of like, well, I still got to figure out what I'm doing over here, or I can't really take care of you, or I don't really know if I can take care of you because I'm trying to figure out what it is I'm doing, you know? and it's kind of the same to me, the same thinking, even if you completely take fear out of it, because I'm obviously not afraid of you. I don't think you're going to come here and rob me, or
That's
like,
where you're wrong, Ty.
okay, well, I'm dead. This is the last
stealing
episode.
those dogs.
This is the last episode. Bijou and Jerry, be good to your new owner. But so like, even if you completely take fear out of it, it's like we still have a lot to figure out just with what we're doing here with our population.
Yeah.
And in some cases, when I see what comes here, like say from south of the border, in a lot of cases, it's like, I don't really feel like we need to import crazy or criminal.
We got enough of that.
Yeah, and it's like, we got to figure, and we obviously have to figure out what we're even doing with that. Like, the mental health situation in this country right now is pretty out of control, I mean, like, it just...
Well, we're not perfect. I mean, that's for sure. We definitely have a lot of shit going on that's not, the way it should be in this country. But we are also a very big country, We're 5% of the world's population, 320 million people. And, the refugee numbers we're talking about are in the tens of thousands, whereas countries like, like Jordan, which has a population of like 5 million, now is like 2 million refugees, I mean, so in my mind, proportionally, I think we can handle it. There's also towns, places like Vermont and Maine where there aren't enough young people to do the necessary jobs, and they need immigrants.
Like the high shelf, or...
Yeah, exactly. There's senior citizens starving to death because they can't reach the balloons.
Yeah, just because they can't. So great. Yeah, no. Well, even like I get it, and I'm not saying my way is the right way, or I mean, it's just another way to look at it. So,
Absolutely.
And that's, like I said, it's one of the things I like about listening to you or reading your Facebook or talking to you, is just like, you're at least open to hearing other things and not blind rage. And
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Like, I have my feelings, but it's not like, you saying that makes me feel like now you're the enemy or you're on the other side. It's like, we're all just trying to figure it out, know.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us is 100% right, but sometimes people want to remind me that I came from immigrants, and I'm like, do you see my point?
That's hilarious.
We don't need more of this thinking.
That's hilarious.
All right. Well, where can people find you, just so...
Check out my show, Unsafe Space Show, at Unsafe Space Show on all social media. We do a monthly show at the Hollywood Improv, and it's also available as a podcast that you can listen to. There's plenty of great episodes with Ty on it. I think you've been on 3 times now.
Yeah, I love it.
And you can find me at tobythecomic.com is my website, and that has all my social media linked from there.
tobythecomic.com.
Yeah.
Okay, well, everybody, you heard it. I am Ty Rivera, and you can find me at americasfavoritefag.com. That's where you can find everything ridiculous to do with Ty Rivera, and I hope you all have a good week, and stay unbothered, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again, Toby.
Thank you.